When dawn broke on Sunday, June 25, 1950, the roar of tank treads and gunfire shattered the stillness along the 38th parallel. Over 135,000 North Korean troops, backed by more than 150 Soviet T-34 tanks, poured towards Seoul, a mere 60 kilometers away. Confronted with such overwhelming force, the South Koreans, fewer than 100,000 ill-equipped men, saw their defenses collapse within hours. It was the start of a lightning war that would upend the entire Korean peninsula. Taken by surprise and lacking armor, the South Korean lines quickly gave way. In 48 hours, the front disintegrated as thousands of civilians fled south. Bridges over the Han River, which cuts through Seoul, became bottlenecks for a massive exodus. By June 28th, in just 3 days of fighting, the capital fell to the north. Scenes of panic and chaos marked the authorities' hurried evacuation. Many residents, unprepared, abandoned homes and possessions, hoping to find refuge further south. The swift fall of Seoul exposed the huge military gap between the two Koreas and shocked international opinion, which was only then grasping the conflict's grim seriousness. As Seoul fell to northern forces, the UN Security Council passed a resolution to protect South Korea. The Soviet Union's absence, caused by its boycott over the Chinese seat dispute, prevented any veto, enabling the United States to lead an international coalition. By July, the first American units arrived under General Douglas MacArthur, finding the South Korean army pushed into the country's southeastern tip. The Pusan Perimeter, around the port of Pusan, now Busan, became the final bulwark against the North's advance. With fewer than 150 kilometers of front, this area defended the only hubs for UN supplies and reinforcement. Fighting was intense, and though outnumbered, the defenders fought on stubbornly. U.S. troops brought modern artillery and tanks, with air power offering critical cover. Despite heavy casualties and mounting pressure, the stand at the Pusan Perimeter held firm, allowing new international contingents to arrive and paving the way for a determined counteroffensive.
Did you know that most people who watch our documentaries aren't subscribed yet? If you enjoy animated maps and history, join our community. Leave a like and subscribe so you never miss the next episodes.
While the Pusan Perimeter held off the North Korean onslaught, General Douglas MacArthur proposed an amphibious maneuver called Operation Chromite. The aim was to land at Incheon, on the peninsula's west coast, exploiting erratic tides and natural obstacles to catch enemy forces off guard. Many American strategists deemed it a risky plan. Incheon featured steep cliffs, treacherous seabeds, and dramatic tidal swings, any of which could turn the assault into a disaster. Yet MacArthur trusted the North Koreans would assume an amphibious landing there was impossible. At dawn on September 15, 1950, the landing began. Over 260 U.S. and Allied ships, including British, Australian, and Canadian vessels, carried more than 70,000 men onto Incheon's beaches. At the forefront, the 1st Marine Division, with 22,000 troops, and the U.S. 7th Infantry Division, with 25,000 soldiers, formed the core amphibious force, backed by South Korean units. Allied naval guns pounded artillery positions, while Australian and South African air units, flying over 150 aircraft, carried out strategic raids to suppress North Korean anti-aircraft defenses. The defenders, focused on the Pusan line, never expected an invasion from the west and were caught completely off guard. Within hours, the beachhead was secured, allowing additional Allied forces to land, including Turkish, French, Belgian, and Greek detachments tasked with fortifying supply routes in the rear. Meanwhile, from the south, South Korean and U.S. troops launched a pincer move, trapping numerous retreating North Korean units. Thanks to surprise, overwhelming firepower, and multinational coordination, Seoul was retaken in just 3 days, September 28th. The operation had a resounding media and morale impact, demonstrating the UN's determination and strategic edge, reversing the tide of a conflict that only weeks earlier had seemed lost to the South. This success significantly improved Korea's prospects under UN support. After retaking Seoul, the UN command decided to push north of the 38th parallel to unify the peninsula under South Korean rule. In early October, the UN and the Republic of Korea, ROK, Army, deployed forces along several axes towards the Chinese border. The western route led from Seoul through Kaesong and Pyongyang via the Gyeongchul Railway and the Taedong River Valley. In the central sector, U.S. and Allied units crossed the Chorwon Highlands, while in the east, reinforced South Korean troops moved on Wonsan and Hamhung. With air supremacy provided by roughly 1,000 American, British, and Australian aircraft, interdiction raids destroyed bridges and rail lines, hampering the withdrawal of some 80,000 remaining North Korean troops. In rear areas, Turkish, Canadian, and French infantry units secured newly liberated zones, while Eastern Front South Korean forces, now at 120,000 strong, aimed for the Tumen River to cut off any escape northward. On October 19th, with the entry into Pyongyang, UN forces captured thousands of enemy soldiers, over 10,000 prisoners in the first 3 days alone. Many in Washington and Seoul believed the war could end by Christmas, given Kim Il-sung's massive setbacks. Diplomatically, however, China grew alarmed at Western troops nearing its border and prepared a major intervention. In secret talks with Stalin, Mao Zedong resolved to send hundreds of thousands of volunteers to support the North, judging a pro-Western regime on Manchuria's doorstep unacceptable. The euphoria of Pyongyang's fall masked a stark truth. The war was about to enter a more unpredictable and bloody phase. As UN forces pressed forward beyond the 38th parallel from late October into November 1950, a new foe appeared. On October 25th, UN patrols encountered Chinese troops along the Yalu River, which marks the boundary between North Korea and Manchuria. They were the Chinese People's Volunteers, sent by Mao Zedong to prevent any pro-Western regime from forming on China's doorstep. The influx of hundreds of thousands of soldiers, over 300,000 by some estimates, aimed to shift the war's balance in the North's favor. Its impact was devastating both psychologically and operationally. Already worn down by weeks of advancing through mountainous terrain with poor infrastructure, UN forces now faced a numerically superior foe skilled in nighttime infiltration. Many outposts along strategic valleys and passes, such as the Yalu Corridor or the Incheon Highlands, crumbled under waves of Chinese infantry driven by fierce ideological resolve and aided by weak UN intelligence. The sudden appearance of Chinese columns on ridgetops, often cloaked in mist and dense forests, made their assaults all the more lethal. Logistically, US, South Korean, and other Allied forces had to supply thousands of troops and vehicles along ever longer, vulnerable routes. Roads were mostly unpaved, bridges lay in ruins, and below-zero temperatures hindered every move. Northern sectors like the Chungcheong River Valley or the Kengai and Manpo areas demanded escorted convoys and constant repairs per kilometer. With China's entry, the war turned multinational, paving the way for one of its harshest, bloodiest phases. Combat now spanned national borders, intensifying an already brutal conflict whose outcome would echo far beyond the peninsula. The Chinese intervention caught the Allies off balance, reshaping strategic possibilities. The massive Chinese offensive unleashed in November overwhelmed UN lines near the Chungcheong River, forcing a rapid pullback. At the Chosin River, Chongjin, the U.S. 1st Marine Division and Allied units found themselves outnumbered by over 120,000 Chinese troops. Frigid temperatures, often below minus 30 degrees Celsius, made every movement a desperate ordeal. Here unfolded one of the Korean War's most legendary clashes. Though they suffered thousands of casualties, some estimates cite over 4,000 dead from wounds, combat, or frostbite, 30,000 U.S. Marines managed to break through the encirclement. Major General Oliver P. Smith, commanding the American forces in the area, refused to call it a retreat, describing the maneuver instead as an advance in another direction. Despite their courage and resilience, the price in human lives was enormous. The 1st Marine Division alone recorded more than 10,000 dead, wounded, or frostbitten. Strategically, UN lines took a crushing blow. The entire northern front collapsed, pushing Allied commanders to orchestrate a general withdrawal to avoid total disaster amid the harsh Korean winter. Early 1951 brought yet another dramatic shift. On January 4th, combined Chinese and North Korean forces launched a broad offensive, reclaiming Seoul for the second time since the war began. Command and civilian evacuations occurred in great haste, leaving behind confusion and dismay. Meanwhile, General Walton Walker's December 1950 death led to General Matthew Ridgway taking charge. He reorganized UN forces and strengthened defensive lines along the Han River. In the ensuing months, with fresh international reinforcements and more coordinated operations, the UN mounted a gradual counterattack. By February, Allied lines solidified south of Seoul, slowing the Chinese advance. U.S. artillery and armor shipments, Turkish infantry units, and other national contingents on the ground helped reduce enemy pressure. By March, the Allies' renewed offensive succeeded in retaking Seoul, reversing the conflict's momentum once again. Yet the front soon settled around the 38th parallel, creating a military stalemate. Repeated attempts at breakthrough by both sides failed, dragging the combat into a war of attrition. This deadlock foreshadowed the protracted negotiations that would dominate the remainder of the war, as neither camp could achieve a decisive victory. In the end, Korea became locked in a precarious balance, marking a pivotal stage of the Cold War. In under a year, the Korean peninsula witnessed frontline reversals, international interventions, and epic battles that redefined the Cold War's trajectory. Yet the story doesn't end here. Tensions kept mounting, culminating in decisions and clashes that would draw in military and political leaders alike, forever altering the peninsula's future. Want to know what happened next? Subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell so you won't miss upcoming episodes. If you enjoyed the video, please hit like and share any questions or curiosities in the comments. We'd love to explore this pivotal chapter of the 20th century with you.